Stop explaining yourself, because the more you explain, the less people respect you. It sounds unfair, almost backwards, but think about it for a second. Have you ever been in a situation where someone misunderstood you, said something that wasn't even true, and you immediately felt this urge to jump in and correct them? Your heart speeds up, your mind races, and before you know it, you're listing reasons, defending your actions, trying to make them see the truth. But instead of feeling understood, something feels off. The conversation shifts, the energy changes, and somehow, you don't feel stronger, you feel smaller. Why does that happen? Why is it that the moment you try hardest to prove yourself, you lose something you can't quite name? What if the very thing you've been taught to do your entire life, explaining yourself, is the exact thing that's quietly working against you? We've all felt it. That uncomfortable moment when someone gets you wrong, when your intentions are questioned, or when you're judged unfairly. It creates this tension inside you, a mix of frustration, anxiety, and urgency. You want to fix it. You want to clarify. You want them to understand who you really are. So you start explaining. You add context, details, reasons, hoping that if you just say enough, they'll finally get it. And for a moment, it feels like the right thing to do. After all, being understood feels important. But deep down, there's also a subtle fear driving it, the fear of being seen the wrong way, of being misunderstood, of not being accepted. And that fear is what pulls you into a cycle that most people never even question. Here's the truth that most people never realize. The need to explain yourself isn't just a habit, it's a psychological trap. It feels natural, automatic, almost necessary. But that's exactly why it's so powerful. The moment someone challenges you, your brain reacts instantly, pushing you to respond, to defend, to justify. You don't pause. You don't question it. You just act. And that's the trap, because in trying to regain control, you actually give it away. You hand over your emotional state to someone else's opinion. Instead of standing grounded in who you are, you start performing, trying to convince, trying to be validated. And without realizing it, you're no longer in control of the interaction they are. To understand why this happens, you have to go back to where it all started: childhood. When you were young, explaining yourself wasn't a weakness, it was survival. If a parent or teacher thought you did something wrong, you explained to avoid punishment, to stay safe, to be accepted. It wasn't me. I didn't mean to. Here's what really happened. And when it worked, when explaining helped you avoid consequences or gain approval, your brain learned something important. Explaining equals safety. Over time, that lesson became deeply wired into you. It stopped being a conscious choice and became an automatic response. Now, years later, even in situations where your safety isn't at risk, your brain still reacts the same way. It pushes you to explain not because you need to, but because it was trained to believe you do. As you grow older, this pattern doesn't disappear, it just changes form. It shows up at work, in relationships, in everyday conversations. A coworker points out a mistake, and before they even finish their sentence, you're already jumping in. Actually, it wasn't my fault, because the deadline changed, or I told them earlier, but no one listened. It happens so fast you don't even notice it. It's not a decision, it's a reflex. Your body reacts before your mind can pause. And even when no one is attacking you, even when the situation doesn't require a defense, you still feel that internal pressure to explain. Over time, this automatic response becomes part of how you communicate, shaping how others see you without you ever realizing it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. People aren't really listening to your reasons the way you think they are. While you're focused on explaining the facts, they're reading something else entirely: your energy. They notice the urgency in your voice, the tension in your body, the need to be understood, and what they interpret isn't clarity, it's insecurity. To them, it looks like you're trying to convince, trying to prove, trying to protect yourself. Even if your explanation is completely valid, it doesn't land the way you expect. Because communication isn't just about words, it's about presence. And when your presence feels unsettled, people pick up on that instantly, often without even knowing why. What makes this even more dangerous is that no one tells you it's happening. There's no moment where someone says, "Hey, I respect you less now." It's subtle, quiet, gradual, but something shifts. The way people respond to you changes. The weight of your words feels lighter. You may not notice it right away, but over time, it adds up. Respect doesn't usually disappear in one dramatic moment, it fades in small, almost invisible ways. And the more you explain, the more you unintentionally signal that you need others to validate you. That silent signal is what slowly erodes how people perceive you, even if they can't explain it themselves. Another truth most people overlook is this: not every criticism is about finding the truth. In fact, a lot of the time, it isn't. When someone throws a comment, a judgment, or even a subtle jab your way, they're often testing something. They're watching your reaction. They're trying to see if they can affect you, if they can shake your confidence, if they can get a response. And the moment you rush to explain yourself, you answer that test without realizing it. You show them that their words landed. You show them that they have influence over your emotional state. But when you don't react the way they expect, when you stay grounded and calm, you change the entire dynamic. Imagine a small dog barking aggressively at a lion. Loud, persistent, trying to provoke a reaction. Does the lion stop, turn around, and explain itself? Of course not. The lion keeps walking not out of arrogance, not out of indifference, but because it knows exactly what it is. That quiet certainty is where its power comes from. Now compare that to someone who feels the need to respond to every bark, every comment, every challenge. The difference isn't strength, it's self-assurance. When you truly know who you are, you don't feel the need to defend it at every turn. And that calm, silence is one of the most underestimated forms of power in human interaction. When someone expects you to react, argue, defend, explain, and you don't, it creates a psychological reversal. Instead of you feeling pressured, they do. The moment you stay calm and say nothing, the energy shifts. Now they're the ones wondering, did I go too far? Why aren't they reacting? What are they thinking? That uncertainty starts to build inside them. Your silence forces them to sit with their own words, without you carrying the weight for them. And that's what makes it so powerful. It removes the reaction they were counting on. It shows emotional control, confidence, and self-possession without needing a single word. In a world where most people react instantly, the ability to remain still stands out in a way that feels almost disarming. I once knew someone, let's call him Marcus, who embodied this kind of presence effortlessly. In meetings, people would challenge him, sometimes unfairly, sometimes aggressively. One day, a colleague publicly accused him of not doing his job, right in front of the entire team. It was uncomfortable, and everyone in the room knew the accusation wasn't accurate. Most people would have jumped in immediately, listing facts, defending their reputation, trying to correct the narrative. But Marcus didn't. He simply looked at the person, nodded slightly, and said in a calm, even tone, "That's an interesting perspective." Then he went right back to his notes. No tension, no defensiveness, no explanation. The room went silent. The person who made the accusation suddenly looked unsure, almost embarrassed. Afterward, I asked Marcus how he stayed so composed. He smiled and said, "The only way their words matter is if I choose to carry them. I just don't pick them up." That moment said more than any explanation ever could. If this approach feels unfamiliar, there are simple ways to start applying it in real situations. The first is called calm agreement. When someone points out a flaw or criticism, instead of defending yourself, you agree with the part that's true without adding anything else. "You were late." "You're right, I was." Then stop. No excuses, no story. It instantly removes tension and shows confidence. The second is the question flip. When someone asks a loaded or critical question, don't rush to answer, direct it. "Why do you always make things about you?" Becomes, "What made you feel that way?" Now the focus shifts, and you stay in control without being confrontational. The third is the light laugh. When someone labels or criticizes you, respond with a relaxed, slightly playful tone. "You're so arrogant. I prefer confident, but I'll work on it." Then move on. Each of these techniques shares the same principle. You're not reacting emotionally, you're responding from a place of calm, grounded self-assurance. Here's the part most people don't want to hear, but it changes everything once you see it. The reason criticism hits so hard isn't always because it's wrong. It's because a small part of you wonders if it might be true. That reaction, that emotional spike, that urgency to defend yourself is often tied to something unresolved inside you. Think about it. If someone accused you of something completely absurd, something you knew for a fact wasn't true, you wouldn't feel the need to argue. You'd brush it off. But when it touches a sensitive spot, something you've questioned about yourself before, it lands differently. The defense isn't really about them. It's about protecting a wound that already exists. And until you recognize that, you'll keep reacting to the same triggers, over and over again. This is why the real solution isn't just learning techniques, it's developing self-awareness. You can memorize strategies, practice responses, and still feel shaken inside if you haven't done the deeper work. True confidence comes from knowing yourself honestly, your strengths, your flaws, your patterns, and being at peace with them. When you've already faced your own imperfections, no one else can use them against you in the same way. Their words lose their emotional charge. They become information, not attacks. And from that place, you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to defend your identity. You simply stand in it. That kind of grounded presence isn't something you perform, it's something you build over time through awareness, reflection, and honesty with yourself. So, here's a simple challenge for you, something small, but powerful. For the next 7 days, play what I call the no defense game. Every time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause, take a breath, and instead of jumping in, either say nothing or respond with the simplest truth without adding reasons or justifications. If you were late, just say, "I was late." If someone misunderstands you, let them. Sit with the discomfort instead of trying to fix it. It won't feel easy at first. In fact, it might feel almost unbearable. Your mind will tell you to correct them, to make things clear, to protect your image. But don't. Just observe that urge without acting on it. Because on the other side of that discomfort is something rare, a version of you that doesn't need permission to feel okay. And when you start to access that, even in small moments, people will feel it. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't need to.